when the radio screamed, "Abort! Abort!" and she didn't listen. The horizon was on fire, tracer rounds tearing through the sky like red lightning. Below her, an entire regiment was trapped, 300 men pinned in a canyon with no cover and no way out. Every senior pilot had already turned back, but Second Lieutenant Ava Morales, the rookie they all called reckless, pushed her throttle to max. She heard the warning alarms blare, felt the aircraft shudder under enemy fire, and dove straight into the kill zone anyway. What she did in the next 90 seconds would rewrite flight. Manuals and silence every voice that ever called her too young to lead. The airbase was silent except for the low hum of engines and the smell of jet fuel. It was supposed to be a simple support run. Fly over Canyon Red, drop supply packs, return before sunset. But every soldier knew that nothing about that canyon was simple. The locals called it the Furnace, a narrow stretch of desert rock that turned into a death trap the moment bullets started flying. At the morning briefing, the big screens flickered with heat maps and enemy movement. Commanders spoke in clipped tones, marking escape routes that didn't really exist. Then the room quieted when Second Lieutenant Ava Morales walked in. She was small compared to the others. Her flight suit still too new, her call sign, Havoc 2, barely earned. Most of the room didn't bother hiding their doubts. "She's the rookie?" one of the veteran pilots whispered. "Yeah," another muttered. Last month she was still training in Arizona. Ava ignored them. She didn't need their approval. She just needed coordinates and altitude clearance. When the mission commander asked for volunteers for the low-fly escort, every hand stayed down. The insurgents had anti-air emplacements hidden all along the canyon. The last pilot who tried it didn't come back. Then Ava's voice cut through the silence. "I'll take the lead." The commander's eyebrows lifted. "You realize the canyon is triple defended?" "Yes, sir," she said calmly, adjusting her gloves. "That's why I'll go first." The room stayed quiet. Some pilots smirked. Others shook their heads, whispering words like reckless and suicidal. But the colonel, a man who'd flown through 3 wars, leaned forward. "You're cleared, Morales," he said finally. "But don't do anything stupid. Stick to the plan." She saluted. "Copy that, sir." What she didn't say, what no one knew, was that she already had a different plan. Hours later, her A-10 Thunderbolt sat at the runway's edge, the desert wind sweeping across the cockpit glass. Her co-pilot, a quiet tech named Lewis, double-checked the systems. "Still time to back out," he said, half joking. Ava smiled. "Back out? I just got here." The engines roared to life, and the aircraft thundered down the strip, lifting into the burning orange sky. As they crossed into enemy airspace, the radio crackled with updates, ground. Units moving through Canyon Red, Regiment. Alpha pinned near coordinates Delta 5. Requesting. Air cover immediately. Ava's HUD blinked red. Multiple heat signatures below. She lowered altitude despite the warnings. Lewis swore under his breath. "Ava, if we go lower, we'll be in their crosshairs." "That's the point," she said. And then they saw it. Below, a convoy of armored trucks lay shredded, smoke curling up from burning vehicles. Men were trapped between 2 cliffs, nowhere to move, surrounded by enemy fire. Command's voice came through the radio, panicked. "All aircraft, maintain distance. We've got heavy anti-air in the zone." Ava's gloved hand tightened on the throttle. "Noted," she said. Then she cut power and dove. The A-10 screamed downward, engines howling as the world blurred past. Alarms erupted. Lewis yelled. The base shouted for her to pull up. But Ava didn't hear any of it, because right then, through the smoke, she saw something no one else could. The regiment's signal flare still burning. They weren't dead yet, and she wasn't going to let them be. The moment Ava Morales pushed the A-10 into the canyon, time fractured. The roar of engines became a single, endless scream. Red tracer fire stitched the sky in violent arcs. The rocky walls of Canyon Red flashed by so close she could see bullet sparks bouncing off the metal. "Pull up! Pull up!" Lewis shouted from the back seat. "Not yet," she said through gritted teeth. Every instrument on the panel went wild. Warning lights flared crimson. Altitude too low. Fuel pressure spiking. Left stabilizer hit. The aircraft trembled like a living thing in pain, but Ava didn't care. Her eyes were locked on the chaos below. 300 Marines were pinned in a crossfire, their position collapsing under RPG fire. The dust was so thick she could barely make out the shapes of their armor. The enemy had the high ground on both cliffs, raining death from above. Command's voice screamed in her ear again. Havoc 2, break off immediately. You are entering a no-return zone. Ava pressed the comms button. Copy, command, she said calmly. Then she switched the channel off. Lewis, she said. Weapons hot. He stared at her, eyes wide. You're going to strafe inside the canyon? That's suicide. Only if I miss. She yanked the stick left, banking hard. The wings barely cleared the rock walls. Then she squeezed the trigger. The GAU-8 Avenger cannon beneath the A-10 opened up, a deafening 30mm storm of tungsten rounds. The entire canyon shook with the sound. Dust erupted from the cliffs as the gunfire carved through enemy lines. The first pass hit 5 emplacements in one sweep. The second shattered a convoy of trucks hidden behind the ridge. Down below, Marines who had been moments from death looked up and saw the gray silhouette cutting through smoke and fire. Who the hell is that? Someone shouted over the radio. No one answered. They were too busy cheering. Lewis was shouting too, half in fear, half in disbelief. You're flying under 200 feet, Ava. That's insane. Then close your eyes, she said, grinning despite the chaos. A rocket whizzed past their nose. Another slammed into the canyon wall behind them, sending shrapnel clattering across the fuselage. Ava twisted the controls, rolling the A-10 onto its side, flying sideways between the cliffs. The maneuver wasn't in any manual. It shouldn't even have been possible, but it gave her a perfect shot at the last ridge. She lined up the crosshairs and fired again. This time, the explosion turned night into day. Target neutralized, Lewis gasped. Ava steadied her breathing. Not yet. We're going back. We're out of countermeasures. Then we'll improvise. She swung the A-10 around for one final run, this time lower, faster, deadlier. The Marines below waved smoke grenades in red and blue to mark their position. Ava dipped her wings in acknowledgement, an unspoken promise that she saw them. Her final strafing run tore through the canyon like thunder. The enemy guns fell silent, one by one. When the ammo counter hit 0, Ava finally pulled up, engines screaming, smoke trailing behind her. The radio crackled with static, then a single, stunned voice. Whoever that was, you just saved an entire regiment. Ava said nothing. Her hands trembled slightly as she guided the battered jet toward the horizon. Lewis looked over at her, still in shock. You're out of your mind, Ava smiled faintly. Maybe, but it worked. By the time Ava cleared the canyon, the A-10 was bleeding smoke. Warning alarms screamed like sirens inside the cockpit. Hydraulic pressure was dropping, and the right wing had taken a hit the size of a football. Lewis's voice trembled over the intercom. We're not going to make it to base. Ava didn't respond. Her focus stayed on the horizon, a faint shimmer where the desert met the dying sun. Fuel reserves? She asked. 6 minutes of flight, maybe less. Then we make them count. Her hands gripped the stick tighter. The controls were sluggish, the aircraft drifting left on its own. The A-10 wasn't built for grace. It was built to take punishment. But this was pushing its limits. Back at command, chaos reigned. Radio chatter exploded through every channel. Who authorized the strike? We didn't. That pilot went rogue. Get me Havoc 2 signal. I want her grounded the moment she lands. But the same officers who barked orders now had to listen to the frontline reports. The regiment she'd saved. If that pilot hadn't shown up, one Marine captain radioed in, we'd be nothing but ashes. Whoever she is, she just did what your whole damn command couldn't. The room fell silent. Ava's name wasn't spoken yet, but they all knew. Inside the cockpit, Lewis wiped blood from his forehead, a cut from the last impact. Ava, engine 2's overheating. We need to eject, she shook her head. Not yet. I'm not leaving her behind. You're talking about the jet? I'm talking about the men we saved. They're still out there. They'll need air cover if the enemy regroups. Lewis stared at her. You can't fly on pride and fumes. Watch me. The engines coughed, sputtered, caught again. Ava adjusted trim controls manually, compensating for the damage. The A-10 limped across the desert like a wounded animal, each mile a small victory. Below, the canyon was still burning. Tiny figures moved, the survivors waving, signaling. One Marine raised a flare that glowed blue against the dusk. Lewis caught it on the monitor. "They're alive." Ava nodded, a faint smile ghosting across her face. Then it was worth it. Suddenly, another alert blared. Missile lock. Enemy radar had picked them up again. Lewis swore. "We've got nothing left, no flares, no countermeasures." "Who says we need them?" Ava replied. She rolled the A-10 into a dive, not away, but toward the missile's source. The G-forces slammed her against the seat. Every bone in her body screamed to pull up. At the last second, she skimmed over the ridge, dropped altitude by 10 feet, and banked hard behind the mountain. The missile shot past, losing lock and detonating harmlessly in the air. Lewis laughed breathlessly. "You're insane," Ava exhaled slowly. "Insane keeps us alive." When they finally crossed back into friendly airspace, the jet was running on pure luck. "Havoc 2, this is command," came the voice on radio, flat and cold. "You are ordered to land immediately. You have violated mission parameters and engaged without authorization." Ava's eyes narrowed. She could barely see through the cracked canopy. "Copy that," she said quietly. "Requesting emergency landing clearance." Lewis looked at her. "You know they're going to court-martial you." She gave a tired smile. "Then I'll face them the same way I faced that canyon." The base runway appeared in the distance, shimmering, fragile, like a mirage. Ava took a deep breath. "Let's bring her home." The A-10 came in low and broken, trailing black smoke like a comet falling back to Earth. Every crewman on the tarmac stopped what they were doing and turned toward the sky. Someone shouted, "It's Havoc 2!" But no one believed she could still be flying. Emergency crews rushed into position as the battered aircraft dropped altitude. "Landing gears jammed," Lewis warned. "I see it," Ava said calmly. Her voice was steady, too steady. The cockpit reeked of smoke and burnt metal. The altimeter dropped fast, 500 feet, 300, 200, and then, with a violent screech of metal on concrete, the A-10 slammed into the runway. Sparks exploded under the fuselage as the aircraft skidded sideways, tearing across the tarmac. Lewis braced for impact, shouting, "We're gonna flip." Ava yanked the stick, cutting engines and twisting the nose against the drag. The A-10 spun, scraped, and finally came to a dead stop just short of the hangar. Silence. The world seemed to freeze. The only sound was the hiss of cooling metal and the faint whine of the dying engine. Then slowly the canopy opened. Smoke poured out like a ghost escaping the wreck. Ava climbed out, her flight suit torn, one arm bleeding. She took 2 shaky steps onto the wing and saluted the control tower before collapsing to her knees. The base medic sprinted toward her. Lewis stumbled out behind her, shouting, "She's alive!" "She did it!" Everyone swarmed the jet, cheering, shouting, until the brass arrived. Colonel Reeves, the same man who'd warned her not to take risks, stood at the edge of the crowd, arms crossed, expression unreadable. The base went quiet. He approached slowly, boots crunching over the debris. "Lieutenant Morales," he said, voice low. "You disobeyed a direct order. You risked your aircraft, your co-pilot, and this base's reputation." Ava, still kneeling, looked up at him. Her face was streaked with soot, eyes bloodshot but unflinching. "Yes, sir," she whispered. The colonel's jaw tightened. Then he pulled something from his pocket. A radio report. 312 Marines alive, he said. "Because of you." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Ava blinked, unsure if she'd heard him right. Reeves continued. "That canyon was supposed to be a graveyard. You turned it into an escape route." For a long moment, neither spoke. Then quietly he said, "Next time, Lieutenant, warn us before you make us look bad." The crowd erupted in laughter and applause. That night, the base mess hall was louder than it had ever been. Someone painted Havoc 2 on a wall in bold black letters. Mechanics passed around pieces of the A-10's scorched fuselage like trophies. but Ava sat alone at the far end of the table, her bandaged arm resting on the tray. She wasn't celebrating. Louis sat across from her, shaking his head. You realize you just saved an entire regiment and embarrassed half the Air Force doing it. She smirked faintly. Guess I'll get a fancy reprimand for that, he grinned. Or a medal. Hours later, when the mess hall had emptied, Ava stepped outside. The desert wind was cool now, the chaos of the day fading into a quiet hum. From the shadows, Colonel Reeves approached again. They're writing reports upstairs, he said. But off the record, that was the finest flying I've ever seen. Ava turned to him. Was it reckless? He smiled. Absolutely. But sometimes, Lieutenant, the reckless ones save the world. He handed her something small, a metal emblem, shaped like the wings of the A-10. Keep it, he said. You've earned your call sign today. She looked down at the emblem, then back at the night sky where the stars shimmered faintly. The same sky she'd nearly died under. By sunrise, every base within 500 miles had heard the story. The name Havoc 2 spread faster than official reports ever could, whispered through comms, mess halls, and barracks. Some said the pilot flew blind through anti-air fire. Others swore she took out an entire enemy battery with one pass. The truth didn't matter. The legend had already begun. At dawn, a message came through the command network, not from her own unit, but from the Marine regiment she had saved. To the pilot of Havoc 2. You didn't just give us air support, you gave us a fighting chance. When we saw that A-10 break the clouds, we thought it was a ghost. Turns out it was an angel in a warplane. Ava sat quietly in the infirmary, reading the words on the tablet in her lap. Her left arm was in a sling. Her flight suit hung on a chair, scorched and torn. Louis walked in, holding 2 cups of black coffee. You made the front page, he said, setting one beside her. Front page of what? Every base bulletin. Even Command in D.C. mentioned you. Ava sighed. They'll forget by next week, he smiled. Maybe, but not the ones you saved. Later that morning, she was summoned to the debriefing room, the one lined with medals and flags. The same colonel who had once called her reckless now stood at the head of the table. Several generals sat in silence, their faces unreadable. Lieutenant Morales, Reeves began, you violated mission protocol, disregarded multiple stand-down orders, and placed your aircraft at extreme risk. Ava straightened. Yes, sir, he paused. And because of that, you achieved what 3 other teams failed to do in the last year. A murmur spread across the room. Ava's throat tightened. Permission to speak freely, sir? Granted. I didn't disobey because I wanted to, she said. I did it because waiting would have cost lives. I'd rather answer for that than regret not trying. The room went silent again. Then one of the generals, an older man with silver hair and a scar across his cheek, nodded slowly. Sometimes, Lieutenant, he said, the book doesn't have all the answers. Reeves looked her dead in the eye. Effective immediately. Your record will note this as an unauthorized maneuver with exceptional results. He smirked faintly. That's military code for, you broke the rules perfectly. The officers chuckled. Ava couldn't help but smile. By the time she stepped out of the room, the hangar below was alive with noise again. Mechanics working on aircraft, pilots preparing for new missions. But when they saw her, the sound shifted. People stopped, turned. Then, one by one, they began to clap. It wasn't loud at first, just a few hands. But it spread, echoing off the metal walls, a rhythm of respect. Louis joined her side, whispering, Guess you're not the rookie anymore. She shook her head, smiling softly. No, just a pilot who did her job. That night, a tradition began. Every new A-10 pilot who joined the unit had to touch the wing of Ava's damaged aircraft, still scarred from the mission, before their first flight. A simple gesture of courage and remembrance. They called it the Havoc Oath. And long after Ava Morales left the base, that oath remained. Years passed. Wars changed names, bases changed commanders, and new pilots came and went. But the legend of Havoc 2 refused to fade. Her story became a kind of flight lore, told in hangars late at night, over coffee and grease-stained manuals. Instructors spoke her name with a quiet respect. Cadets whispered about the canyon dive, that impossible maneuver no simulator could ever replicate. And though Ava Morales had retired quietly, far from the desert skies that nearly killed her, her ghost still lived in every cockpit. It was another war now, another nameless stretch of sand and smoke. A new A-10 pilot? Lieutenant Cara Dean was in the air, young, determined, and barely out of training. Her squadron was pinned down by heavy fire in a mountain pass eerily similar to Canyon Red. Command's voice barked through the radio. "All aircraft, fall back." "It's a kill zone!" Cara hesitated. The tone of panic in her commander's voice was identical to the stories she'd grown up hearing. Below, friendly troops were trapped, 36 soldiers cornered by enemy armor, and right there, in the chaos, she remembered the tradition. Her fingers brushed the small metal charm bolted to her flight console, a worn piece of titanium shaped like wings. On the back, etched in faded letters, were 2 words, for Havoc 2. Cara took a breath. "Command, this is Viper 3. I have visual on ground units. Negative, Viper 3. You are not cleared for a dive." But Cara was already pushing the throttle forward. The engine screamed. The A-10 dropped altitude in a brutal, perfect arc. Tracer rounds flashed past the cockpit. Radar locks pinged in red. Her co-pilot yelled, "Cara, this is suicide." She smiled, the same kind of half-wild grin that Ava once wore. "Then tell the afterlife to clear a runway." From below, the soldiers looked up just in time to see the A-10 tear through the smoke. Its cannon roaring like thunder, the enemy lines shattered under the first barrage. Tanks exploded. Sandstorms rose from the shockwaves. Over the radio, voices screamed. Disbelief, awe, hope. "Who the hell is that?" "That's not command. That's someone else." The call sign echoed through the comms as Cara banked low, her aircraft dancing through chaos. "This is Havoc 2, she said quietly, her voice steady as the engines roared. "Keep your heads down. I've got you covered." In the command center miles away, officers froze. Havoc 2? That call sign hadn't been active in years. The general turned toward his aide. "Who authorized that ID?" No one answered. And then, through the static, they heard the impossible. The same calm voice Ava Morales had used decades before, replayed through history itself. Confident, unshaken, fearless. On the ground, the soldiers broke free, moving through the chaos as Cara cleared the cliffs with precision strikes. When her ammo finally ran dry, she pulled up, engines howling, wings slicing through the sunrise. Hours later, the rescued troops were evacuated. Reporters swarmed the field. The young pilot climbed out of her A-10, face streaked with sweat and soot. One old mechanic walked up, staring at the wings on her flight suit. "You know," he said softly. "I saw that emblem once before," Cara smiled. "Yeah, I know who wore it first." He nodded slowly. "And now you're part of her story." That night, somewhere across the desert, Ava Morales, older now, silver hair pulled back, watching the news on a flickering TV, saw the footage. The headline read, "Unknown A-10, pilot saves regiment with impossible dive, echoes of Havoc 2. For a long moment, she just stared at the screen, the hum of the air conditioner the only sound in the room. Then she smiled. Quiet, proud and just a little wistful. Outside her window, the night sky was clear. The stars hung motionless, like tracer rounds frozen in eternity. She raised a glass of water to the window and whispered, "For every rookie they ever doubted." The legend of Havoc 2 was never written in medals or briefings. It lived in the breath between courage and madness. In the moment a pilot dives, not knowing if they'll ever rise again. And long after the wars ended, her story became what every soldier, every flyer, every soul who faced the impossible would whisper before takeoff, "For Havoc 2, the one who flew when everyone else turned back."